Hi, everyone. We are going to look at three more rums today in sequence from another strange part of the world, another micro distillery, which of course interests me because they're the ones that I think do the most interesting work in the world these days, which is not to malign the big guns, but it's just that, this is the stuff that interests me right now. This is a brand called 83 Islands, which is based on Vanuatu, which is a small archipelago to the east of Australia, to the west of Fiji, and to the north of New Caledonia in the Coral Sea. That kind of places it in your mental map of the Rumiverse, so to speak. It's the only distillery on the island, and it was founded just around 2016, 2017 by a young man, or middle-aged man, or whatever, Pierre-Luc Chabot, and very interesting fellow. And apparently from the time he was in his 20s, he wanted to do a distillery in Canada. But the regulatory regime and the hoops he had to jump through seemed to be so insurmountable that he kind of shelved the idea for a while. But as it turned out, his sister and brother-in-law had opened up a small accounting firm in Vanuatu in the main island of Efate. And they suggested perhaps he could go over there. There's some sugarcane floating around. There's potential to do something because there is no distillery on the islands. But there is lots of potential for hybridization and fancy canes and so on and so forth. So he decided, why not? He did some training at the Moonshine University in Kentucky. He also did some work with the Ayalas, who run the Runway University. And then he ordered a 500-liter hybrid pot column still from Müller and shipped it over to Vanuatu. And then he went over there to start setting in place the logistics. You'll notice that there is, to some extent, a little bit of similarity here with the new Renegade company, and that's not the only point of similarity. Right, so somewhere around 2017, they started laying down casks, many of them, because the part of the philosophy of the company is to basically use as many different types of casks as possible: virgin oak, ex-bourbon, rye casks, ex-chardonnay, French oak, take your pick, whatever they can lay their hands on, I suppose. And what they did is they started to fill those, but they also started experimenting with hybridized cane. Now, of course, for those of us who are interested in rum history and that of sugarcane, which the two are, of course, inextricably entwined, we know that sugarcane originated in Asia. Some people say Indonesia, some people say Melanesia, and so on. I'd say Indonesia is probably closer to the right place, but it did spread, and the islands of the Pacific certainly got strains of these sugarcane plants over the centuries, and there's very little hybridization going on there. So to kind of like pick and choose various different varietals is really quite interesting. It's very similar to what we were looking at not too long ago with one of the, which one was it? I think it was not the Paz, was it the Bali? Or the Paz, which was using monovarietal canes in a particular terroir. That certainly applies here. Over and beyond that, the company does have its issues because Vanuatu is susceptible to earthquakes, cyclones, and all sorts of natural phenomena that can interrupt things, and that creates issues for them with keeping of records and making sure their stock is safe. They have had barrels explode on them when the hoops expanded too much. The barrels expanded too much and just burst the hoops. They've had other cases where they've lost records and so on. So it's quite a bit of a challenge, and it's really quite amazing that they've still managed to keep going after all this time. 2025 seems to be their banner year because this was the year that they released the first commercial expression that reached a wider audience. And they did that through Justin Bosley's Dead Reckoning independent bottling company out of Australia that then hit the UK market, I believe. So people who went to the Rum Festival in the UK probably got a chance to try it, although I'm fairly certain there's sample bottles floating around all over the place. Right, that's all the introduction I can give you. Let's talk about the rums themselves. So there are three of them. The first one is called the Yumi. I pronounce it Yumi. It might be Yummy for all I know, which is very similar to what they Bosley bottled. And it is a 45% rum from sugarcane juice, vintage 2025, and really not much more to say about it. I'm sure there's lots more details on the website, but in this case, I don't really know what the fermentation period is yet. Oh, yeah, 17 days. Well, sorry, there you go. And it's got a batch number, 153 bottles. Quite interesting. The second one is what's called the Forgotten Casks. Now, if you hear that, the first thing you're going to think about is that marketing nonsense that St. Lucia likes to do with its Forgotten Cask series. There is something similar to that, except in those cases, it's not like they lost the casks at all. The casks were always there, and they knew they had them. What they did was lost the records that told you what was in the casks. And that was as a result of some storm that destroyed some of their records and so on, as well as a number of barrels, apparently. So this is a combination of 2 barrels. And what do they say about a blend of 2 unrecorded barrels from our earliest stocks, which would make it just around 2021 or thereabouts, I believe it is. And again, this was bottled in 2025. They don't say what it's from, and they themselves potentially, possibly don't know. They did say somewhere in their literature that this was probably from molasses. And there's something very interesting about the red color, the brown red coloring. I haven't seen this kind of reddish tint in rums for quite some time. The last one is a single cask offering, and this is one of their series that they're going to call the single cask editions, right? Basically, it's as far as I know, it's 54%. There's ex-bourbon first fill, and then there's really a lot of information at the back here, which is really nice to see. And it was filled in October of 2021 and bottled in 2026, which is the cask. So it's just about 4.5 years old and a bit. Now they say that it's pure. They say the type is pure cane, and I'm going to take that on faith that what they mean that this is a cane juice based distillate. But I'm not sure. And there's something about the profile in here that makes me think, perhaps that's not the case. Let's try them one at a time, and then we'll see what we've got. There is a nice kind of sweet and sour vibe to this. Now, usually when you have a really high ester Jamaican style or a high ester unaged rum, whether it's an agricole style, as we saw the other day from Casa Caña from the Philippines or so, or even and of course we all know about the Clarence and the Charandas and what have you, there's a really strong agave, salt, olivey note to it. That's not here. In point of fact, this is actually quite sweet. It's the very faintest bit sour. And there's a little bit of pimentos, a little bit of balsamic vinegar, maybe some figs or two. And then there's sweet sugar water and so on. It's actually quite nice. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's yummy, but it's perfectly serviceable as a young, unaged, agricole style rum. Yeah, no problems at all with it. This one here is quite a bit different. Obviously, it's 4 years old, but bear with me. Let's go to the stuff that's unusual, which is to say there's some fruits, there's some caramel, there's some vanilla. The barrels apparently were charred, level 2, level 3 char, so there's definitely you're going to get that. A little bit of pineapple, just a bit of strawberries. It's got that bubblegum type flavor, which is kind of nice. It's even at the strength it's at, which is 50%, it's actually easygoing. You sniff it, there's nothing. But as it opens up, what you start to get is a preponderance of 2 things. 1, vanilla, 2, coconut. I'm at a loss to describe that. In point of fact, what this reminds me of is Dr. Pepper. It's like a soda in that sense. And that's not a disqualifier, but it does kind of move it off at an angle to what a rum you think a rum should be. Now, you could argue that's terroir, and that is the cane that they used, and it's the distillation techniques and the fermentation period. I really don't know. All I'm telling you is that's what it smells like. Yeah, it's actually kind of neat. It's a bit thick on the nose, and there's a nice sweetness to it that I like, a little bit of ginger, and sort of like beer hops, strange as this may sound. That strange sort of soury vegetal note to it, which is far from unpleasant, actually. The last one is the single cask, which is also 4 years old, 54%. And this one is probably the most traditional rum of the 3, which is to say this is a recognizable profile that we know when we see it, we know what we're getting. A rum, a strong one, 54%, and a 4-year-old, it's got a nice little golden color, which is nice. Yeah, so caramel, toffee, all the usual hits are playing here. Blancmange, white chocolate, a little bit of coffee down there in the background. There's a slight minerally note to it that's actually far from unpleasant. And unlike this one, the vanilla and the coconut are kept well in the background. It's there, but not to the point where it starts to destabilize the entire world of democracy, so to speak, right? Tasting it, well, yeah, here you're getting the more sweet. It's a little bit more of unaged agricole style for sure. It's slightly sweet. It's delicate almost, which is nice. It's got a bit of heat to it from that 45%, which goes down well. There's a little bit of key lime pie and maybe some, lemon rind shavings, that kind of thing, which balances off things really well. Yet, strangely enough, the taste feels simple. Like you've got 3 or 4 notes and that's it. It's not as if there's a whole bunch going on here that gets more and more complicated or more and more intense as time goes by. No, it plays 3 or 4 hits and then it stops the song, and that's pretty much what you're getting. The Dr. Pepper style rum of the excess vanilla and coconut shavings of this one, the Forgotten Cask. Well, there's a certain wininess to this. Perhaps they use they say it's ex-bourbon, okay, but there's a certain wininess to this that is really kind of interesting. There's red grapes, grapefruit, lemon rind, cake, ginger, oatmeal cookies, raisins, red grapes, that kind of thing. A few delicate flowers. Here, I think it was the right call to make to put this at 50%. Weaker, and you'd lose a lot of this stuff. There is some interesting notes here. It's got a really good vibe to it in the sense that the flavors all play reasonably well together. Again, just like with this one, the one thing I do notice is that it's got about 3 or 4 dominant notes, and then everything else surrounds that, but they're kind of drowned out, and therefore what you're getting is the main theme, but the second and third violins are kind of getting drowned out by that. This one here, I would suggest, is the one that I like the most out of the 3. Yeah, and that's not surprising because this has got the most going on in it, which is kind of surprising given the fact that I don't think they had charred barrels for this one. Also, I don't know about the fermentation period for either, so bear with me on that. But here yes, I did say that the standard hits of a regular aged rum are playing. So you've got coconut, you've got some strawberry marmalade. There is also toffee, white chocolate, coffee grounds. There's a slight ashy and minerally note to that. There is also leather, a little bit of smoke, which you would expect on that sort of thing. But there's also some nice fruits down there in the background. Not too many, not too intense. Perhaps plums, prunes, that kind of thing. Blackberries. There's a light hint of flowers, which I like, which kind of like gives you some nice top notes. And overall, this is probably the rum that if anybody was to try would be the one that they like the most. This one is just a bit too odd, which is not to say it's bad, just that it's kind of at an angle to what people are expecting. And this one is a little bit too simple to compete seriously with agricoles. But that doesn't mean that any of them are bad in any way. It just means that they're different and one has to get used to that. Because remember, what they're doing is using monovarietal cane in a terroir that is different from what we used to. We've got to remember that and keep that at the back of the mind. The second thing is that they are going farm specific. In other words, as they develop their relationships with the farmers on the island, then even though sugarcane grows wild there and it's not commercially produced, farmers do have their little stands and crops here and there and whatever. And overall, I think the company does like 300-400 tons a year of sugarcane crushing. So that's not small by any means. But remember what I mentioned, that concordance with Renegade Distillery in Grenada? They also had specific relationships with specific farms, and then they kind of like went back and forth with them to both combine traditional lore and knowledge with modern techniques and the ideas of what they wanted for their rums. And what they're doing is they're creating expressions that are unique to every farm, exactly like Renegade did. As this grows on, this is still in its early stages and it's by no means complete. There isn't a complete run of rums there that we can figure out yet, but the important thing to understand is that what we're going to see is some very, very terroir-specific, farm-specific rums coming out that will have names that will reflect that. And to some extent, I think this one was the one that I saw first. This one was called the Arid Farm. Yeah, Arid Farm's Heirloom Cane. So that kind of specificity is going to be something to look forward to, so we can get a sense of what the terroir is of Vanuatu, which is by itself quite interesting. Scores. 80, 82, and about 84, 85 for this one, for the single barrel. And Here's my general opinion of the three, having tried them over a period of a couple of days, because obviously, I wanted to have the notes straight in my head and see how the glass developed over time. I think what we're seeing here is a lot of potential. I think what we're seeing here is a company and a rum that has the right ideas of what it wants to do, especially with its ideas of going with, pot stills, with varietals of cane that are unhybridized and that are as close to the original strains that used to exist back in the day. They're making a big thing about this, by the way. The barrel aging is probably the most traditional part of what they're doing at this point, which just goes to show how much the earlier parts of the process that they're using influence the later ones that come out the door. The barrels kind of make that easier because then that creates a profile that we like. But I think there's still a lot more to see from them that we haven't yet gotten a chance to look at yet. And they're new. They just got started. Christ only knows how much hoops they had to go through just in terms of supply chain management and getting stuff there, shipping it there, inclement weather, earthquake, cyclones, whatever. That they have managed to produce three rums like this right out of the gate is nothing short of impressive. And I think you should watch for them in the future if you ever see them at a rum festival, whether it's in Europe or North America or Asia in the years to come. Worth watching these guys. So that's it from me. I know it's a bit long, but that's what happens when you have three rums to go at all at once. Take care, everyone, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.